MOTROLIX.
Hello and welcome to the third episode of the Cadillac Society podcast, the show where we discuss the latest news, rumors, and anything else surrounding the iconic luxury marque. On today's episode, we will discuss the all-new 2025 Cadillac Optiq. I'm your host, G, and joining us, as always, is Cadillac Society Executive Editor, Alex Luft.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be back for the third episode. We're 3 for 3.
3 for 3.
We're
and
on a roll.
Yes,
Yep,
sir.
That's right.
But before we get started, if you want to subscribe or listen to the show, go to CadillacSociety.com/podcast. There you will find all the ways you can watch, listen, and subscribe to this show. You can also find us in podcatchers. Just search Cadillac Society in Apple Podcast or iTunes. Spotify and Amazon are coming soon. So, let's talk about the Optiq.
Yeah, let's talk about the Optic. There's quite a few things to discuss here. And I guess we could start with what it is, how it fits into the lineup, and then we'll go into some other details. So first and foremost, the Optic is Cadillac's fifth electric vehicle. Well, technically it's the fourth because the Vistiq hasn't launched yet, but overall there will be five once the Optic and the Vistiq both launch. And the Optic essentially slots in underneath the Lyriq. So the Lyriq is the D segment. It is kind of your midsize segment. This is the C segment. So it's smaller than midsize, meaning compact. Ironically, the Optic is not really all that compact to begin with. It's not really all that small because we'll see why here in a bit. Actually, I don't want to get into that now. But suffice it to say that it is the luxury crossover C segment that this vehicle is slotting into. So once the whole lineup is fleshed out for Cadillac, it will be Optic at the very left, and then it will go Lyriq above it, Vistiq above the Lyriq, and then above the Vistiq it will be the Escalade IQ, and then above the Escalade IQ will be the Escalade IQ-L. From a sizing standpoint, this is the kind of the lineup the way it's going to be. And so the Optic is essentially the smallest Cadillac crossover. It also is spelled in that funky fashion of, IQ at the end, with IQ being Cadillac's naming structure for electric vehicles. Everything that's electric in the Cadillac lineup now will end in IQ. Even the Escalade, it's Escalade IQ, right? That's kind of the naming convention there. And, we talk about size. It's really not all that small. In fact, when you compare it to, say, the XT5, it's almost the same size dimensionally as the XT5. So it's a small vehicle from a positioning standpoint, but in what has become kind of customary for Cadillac, the size is bigger than the rest of the segment, if you will, and we'll get to exactly why that is as well. There's a technical reason why that's the case. And then I guess we could also talk about the platform. So as far as the platform goes, the name that everyone will use, the name that you will see the media use and those who write about it, talk about it, everyone's going to say it's based on the Ultium platform. But that's kind of really a misnomer. There's no such thing exactly as the Ultium platform. What there is are two platforms that represent the Ultium platform. The first is BEV3, Battery Electric Vehicle 3, which is what this rides on, and then BT1, the other Ultium platform, which is Battery Truck 1, Generation 1. So essentially that's Hummers, Escalade IQ, Silverado EV, Sierra EV, so on and so forth. So BEV3 is what supports the Optiq. Now, the interesting thing here is that the Optiq, from a sizing standpoint, it has a wheelbase that's 6 inches shorter than that of the Lyriq. But like I said, this is still a pretty big, pretty large vehicle. Just if you look at how it compares to current internal combustion engine Cadillac crossovers, so the XT4 essentially, which is what the Optiq replaces. You look at that and, the XT4 has a wheelbase of 109.4 inches in length. The Optiq's wheelbase is 116.3 inches. So roughly 6 or 7 if we round, 7 inches longer than the vehicle it's supposed to replace eventually in the lineup. You look at the XT5, it has an even longer wheelbase than the XT5, and the XT5 is already in a different segment, size-wise and price-wise and feature content-wise, than the Optic as well. So it's a compact, but it's a big compact. It really is what I'm getting at here. Now, the reason that I just alluded to. So the reason for this is the battery. They need to find space. They need to have the space for the battery to put enough of the battery in there to deliver a decent driving range off of one charge. The Optic delivers 300 miles, so that's fine. And once you get to that 300-mile range, it's really kind of the sweet spot. It seems to be still in this nascent EV space. And I should also note that the Optic shares its architecture, the variant of the BEV3 architecture, because there's a few variants. The Lyriq rides on one of the variants, and the Optic rides on another variant. The Vistiq rides on yet another variant of BEV3. So this is a very modular, very flexible, very pliable architecture that can be used across all kinds of vehicles, whether they are small, midsize, or midsize plus in the case of the Vistiq. And so from a portfolio standpoint for GM as a whole, the Optic shares its architecture, the variant of that BEV3 architecture, most directly with the Chevy Equinox EV and with the Buick Electra E4. So essentially, those three models share this variant of the architecture. There's a bigger variant that's Lyriq, Blazer EV, and Electra E5 from Buick. And then there's Vistiq and a few other models that will be similar in size to the Vistiq that have yet to be announced. So essentially, that's where we are. I guess we could talk about powertrain and range next. And here's where things, kind of get interesting and somewhat technical. So I don't know if hopefully everyone's interested in the technical details, but battery, 85 kilowatt hour battery pack. It's a dual motor, so all Optics, at least for the 2025 model year in the US, they will all be all-wheel drive because of the dual motor setup. In China, there will be a front-wheel drive only model as well as an all-wheel drive model, but for the time being, when the vehicle is being launched, it's going to be all-wheel drive only in the States. So dual motor, all-wheel drive, 300 horsepower, 354 pound-feet of torque, pretty healthy numbers. If you compare these to an internal combustion engine model like the XT4, for example. So the XT4 is powered by the 2-liter turbocharged LSY. It's an inline four-cylinder, turbocharged, but still an inline four-cylinder engine. That makes 228 horsepower, I want to say, and about 258 pound-feet of torque. So you basically get here quite a bit more power and quite a bit more torque. So, this thing is going to go a lot faster than, it's going to feel a lot faster from a driving standpoint than the XT4 that it will eventually replace in the lineup. The interesting thing here is that even though it is a dual motor configuration, the motors are not the same. So the front motor is the primary motor. It has a magnet. And the rear motor, in the case of this dual motor setup, it is an induction motor. So there is no magnet. It's kind of there along for the ride to provide some temporary traction benefits, temporary propulsion, but it's not there to be always working like the front motor is. So there is a difference between the motors. When people say sometimes dual motor, I think they automatically think twin motor, the motors are the same. Not the case at all for the Optic here.
Is that across all EV setups, or did we see something a little differently for the trucks?
No, they're different motors.
Okay.
Yeah, it's different motors, different setups. I believe the Optic is the only Cadillac EV that has been announced thus far, at least, that has a rear induction motor rather than a magnet wound actual secondary motor. So for instance, if you go Lyriq, you have Lyriq rear-wheel drive. That's kind of the standard powertrain. And then you could option it out to be all-wheel drive. And if you go for the all-wheel drive, you get two magnet wound motors. And there's no induction motor whatsoever. So both motors are quite powerful, and that's where they deliver that 500 horsepower and 450 pound-feet of torque in the case of the Lyriq all-wheel drive. So basically, no, yeah, this induction setup is unique to
The Optic?
the Optic.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's the same it's the same as it is on the Chevy Equinox EV as well, actually. So it's the same setup. They both use. I don't know if the motors are the same. I imagine that they are. Don't quote me on that just yet. But the Equinox EV also uses a front magnet wound. I keep saying the word wrong. Magnet wound front motor, and at the rear it also has an induction motor as well. And by comparison, by the way, the Optic is more powerful than the Equinox EV. So the Optic, like I mentioned, it makes 300 horsepower. The Equinox EV makes 288. The Optic makes 354 pound-feet of torque. The Equinox EV all-wheel drive, right, makes 333. So it's slightly more powerful. I wouldn't believe that they're using different motors. I think it's just the way that they operate and tune the motors that is different here. But I will double check that and correct that if need be. From a range standpoint, like I mentioned, it's 300 miles of range from a single charge. That's a maximum amount, meaning don't expect that to always be the case. If you drive like, you're on a racetrack, then you're gonna get less than that.
If you want to feel the horses,
Yeah,
the battery's gonna return the favor.
exactly. You're gonna pay for it in one way or the other. There's DC fast charging that can add up to 79 miles of range in about 10 minutes. That's the charging speed there. And like I mentioned, in China, there will be a front-wheel drive only model alongside an all-wheel drive model as well. There's drive modes, the typical drive modes that Cadillac essentially has offered on its kind of core models, right? Non-performance core models. Tour, that you can use for everyday driving. There's Sport for essentially kind of enhanced road driving and improved steering response. And then there's Snow Ice, obviously, that modulates and prevents wheel spin. And then My Mode, which you can personalize as a combination of those modes. So you could adjust steering feel and brake responsiveness, from what I understand. The chassis, it uses what Cadillac calls passive plus dampers. So they're not exactly a completely reactive damper like magneto-rheological dampers or MRC or MagneRide, depending on which brand you choose to go with that day. They're not like that, but they do actually do a pretty good job at soaking up the bumps, keeping the vehicle steady and delivering a smooth ride. So the Premium Plus stuff, even though it's not the highest tech, it still does a very good job. I've experienced it in a few vehicles already across the GM stable, and it's always been a pretty good ride without much of an expense associated with it as well. So there is that. And then, beyond that, you get the typical GM EV technology. So you get regen on demand. In the case of the Optic, it is pressure sensitive. So you don't, if you don't go all the way and you don't pull that paddle all the way, it's going to only, regen as much as you're pulling it. So if you're only pulling it 50%, it will regen at 50% and brake the vehicle at 50%, not 100. So it's not on or off.
It's in direct relation to how hard you're pulling on that.
Exactly.
Okay.
There's one pedal driving, which with, I assume, 2 modes as well, and then dual level charge cord. The typical GM electric vehicle technology that has been making the rounds. So that's the powertrain, the range, the chassis. That's that kind of stuff. You want to talk about the exterior next?
Absolutely.
So anyone who's kind of been following GM's rollout and cadence of their electric vehicles, they'll instantly, I think, recognize the Optic as having a very similar, if not identical, silhouette to that of the Equinox EV. Now, I shouldn't say identical because the rear end is different here. The Equinox EV has one kind of a certain rear end. The Optic has kind of a fastback-like setup, so they are different in that regard. But when I say what I'm referring to specifically is the stuff at the front, the windshield, the way that the base of that windshield is pushed and pulled forward. So you basically get this expansive, huge windshield that is really it really delivers a very unique appearance, especially when you look at it from the side. You basically see this very unique A-pillar configuration where it's a long, pronounced, swept A-pillar. And the way that the reason this happens is that they took their entire, they took the base of the windshield, essentially, the base of the A-pillar, and they pushed it forward, or I guess they pulled it forward instead of being pushed or pulled forward. They moved it forward, right? I don't know what kind of action exactly you take when you
pushing and pulling. They'll get it there right away.
They'll get there eventually. In this case, the team that was pulling it towards the front was stronger than the team that was pulling it. It was like a tug of war.
Were they?
It was a tug of war.
Were they aware that they were supposed to be pushing when they were pulling?
I don't know, but the end result to me is not all that great, and I'll get into my thoughts. I just want to give our listeners and viewers just kind of the rundown of the features, and then I'll get into my thoughts towards the end. But the A-pillars there, it looks exactly the same shape as it is on the Equinox EV and on the Buick Electra E4. So there's no escaping that. And, there's platform sharing stuff. Again, I'll get into that in a second. They did do a lot of interesting things, though, with the way they incorporated a lot of features, body work. For instance, there is a roof encompassing glass work. So essentially that fixed glass roof, it enables a seamless transition from the glass to the sheet metal. That typically is not the case. Typically, you got to, mold those together in all kinds of strange ways. It works. It works for, even a few GM models. But in the case of the Optiq, this is a unique setup. There's the black crystal grille, so you have that LED grille that incorporates LED lights, and it changes if you get a one trim level versus another, it changes on the Optiq, which is cool. It's similar stuff that we've seen from the Lyriq, but in the case of the Optiq, it is quite a bit squatter. The grille doesn't extend that far down into the lower front fascia. It really kind of ends, 30-40% within the front fascia vertically. And there's the light up Cadillac logo as well. There's a very interesting rear quarter panel that essentially, you basically have this rear quarter panel window that's achieved through what Cadillac calls Cadillac First Precision Pattern in acoustic laminate glass. Now that's a mouthful, but at the end of the day, what it results in is this kind of pattern here. So the graphic pattern that's on that window that essentially is past the rear door, it is found throughout the Optiq, and it also aligns at the rear with the Mondrian crest within the actual taillights. So it's kind of like a nod to classic Cadillac styling of having fins, all that stuff. It's a little throwback. It's cool. I don't know if I really like it necessarily over here, but I guess we can get into that in the thoughts section. And then there's that choreographed signature lighting. So when the driver or whoever has the key fob approaches or exits the Optiq, the key fob actually begins an entire choreographed lighting sequence to greet them, which is really cool. It looks great on the Lyriq. It looks pretty good on the Optiq as well. Other notable elements are flush door handles. There is this belt line kink as well, right past, right at the rear door, I'd say, towards the end of the rear door. It's got a little kink there. I guess they didn't want to do a flat belt line, which in my opinion would have looked better, but I don't know if they actually could have done it. And then, the rear end here, you have a dual tail light signature, same thing at the front, dual headlight design as well, where you have the horizontally oriented turn signals, and then the vertically oriented daytime running lights, plus the vertically oriented inside of those vertically oriented actual headlights. 2 rear spoilers at the back. That's something else that's interesting. So you have the roof mounted or the hatch mounted spoiler here that actually lets air through. So there's it's only mounted technically at the edges. Between it, there's airflow that will go through. And then the second one, you can barely see it, but if you look just above the Cadillac crest at the back, you'll see the secondary spoiler there. So interesting configuration there. And you could also get, I should note, a black roof on all the colors. except for black, which it already has a black roof. So if you want the A pillar, the B pillar, the C pillar, the D pillar, all those pillars plus the roof to be black, you can get it in black as well, or you can get it in body color.
If you want to see all of the colors that the Optic has available, CadillacSociety.com just published an article this week where you can go and see every single color option available.
Yeah. All right. You want to talk about the interior for a bit here? The space overall. So given that this shares its architecture with the Equinox EV, the space overall, the packaging, it's very similar to that of the Equinox EV. And I found that vehicle when I drove it just a few weeks ago here. I found the Equinox EV to be plenty spacious, especially for the footprint that the vehicle has. It's got plenty of space in there. Front row, second row, trunk, plenty of space. So I don't expect the Optic to be any different. That's really the packaging. There's a lot of technology. The interior tech, the materials, the appointments, they're all different from the Equinox EV and different from the Electra E4, the Buick. And there's just a lot. There's a 33-inch diagonal display that obviously we also see now in Lyriq. That's where it started, and it's now made its way to XT4, the refresh for the 2024 model year. The CT5 also refreshed for the 2025 model year. And the Vistiq, I believe, will also get it, although Cadillac hasn't yet confirmed this, but I do believe that the Vistiq will also feature the same display. And it is a good display. It's bright, crisp, it's curved, it's beautiful. It's got, over 9K resolution, projecting over 1 billion colors, astronomical figures. Suffice it to say, the display is good. All right, we'll just call it that. Super Cruise, it has Super Cruise. That's standard, actually, on the Optic, which is pretty cool. There is a whole bunch of other stuff. Advanced radar, camera, and ultrasonic sensor tech that's integrated throughout the Optic, and it helps provide enhanced views, sensing, monitoring of surroundings in all kinds of everyday driving conditions and scenarios. There is a whole host of standard safety and driver assistance technologies like adaptive cruise control, blind zone steering assist, enhanced automatic parking, forward collision alert. There's all kinds of other. Let's just say that the Optic has the safety and driver assistance tech. It has it. All right, whatever you want, it has it. And it also has Super Cruise, so it's like a double whammy. The infotainment system on the display that I mentioned, the 33-incher, it has Google built-in compatibility. So you get Google Maps, Google Assistant, all that stuff. And the sound system. It's an AKG, which I believe is just like the mic that you happen to be using right now. Yeah, there you go. It's an AKG mic. So the Optic has a standard 19-speaker AKG audio system with Dolby Atmos, which is, for anyone who is an audiophile, they'll know what Dolby Atmos means. But essentially, this is a really, really good audio system with 19 speakers in a compact. Well, it's supposed to be a compact. It's bigger than a compact, like we already discussed, but it's good.
They're taking care of it. They're taking care of all the technology. You got the LED screen, you got the surround sound, you got the comfort. You can set it, Super Cruise.
Yep.
Drive around, enjoy yourself a little bit.
Just with your arms folded, just sit there like this.
It's not a bad gig, man. I like that.
Yeah,
That's the future. I like the future.
The future is now, though, or in the future.
It's tangible.
The
future is tangible,
and so is the excitement. All right, so there's a big focus here, obviously, on not only the tech, not only all that, but if you look at the finer details in the interior, there's a focus on using new kinds of materials and new approaches to applying the materials that they're using, and also placing those materials. So, for instance, there's a patterned accent fabric that is woven from yarn, and it's also made from 100% recycled materials. That is present and accounted for here. There's also what Cadillac is calling paperwood. It's a paperwood veneer, which is made up of equal parts tulip wood and, get this, recycled newspaper.
Wow.
Paperwood. So that's the interior. 5 passenger seating capacity, 2 rows of seating, a good amount of trunk space. From everything I've seen here, it's, a very similar execution of the interior as the Lyriq, but obviously slightly different and slightly smaller as well. And I think that brings us to production availability. We could talk through that right now. So it's 2 trim levels that will be available, luxury and sport, at least at launch. And so there's no premium luxe. There is no, I don't think there's ever going to be a premium luxe. And this kind of goes back to the conversation you and I had just last week about the 2025 Escalade refresh. And, essentially what will happen to the trim level structure. Well, we see that on full display here. Either you go luxury, which has bright work, essentially chrome-like bright work on the body, or you go sport, which is body color or black. So those are the 2 directions you go in. I believe they're all going to be equipped the same. So if you go luxury or sport, the feature set is going to be the same. It's really all about persona, appearance, and the overall aesthetic of how it looks. In the US, pricing for the Optic. You ready for this? $54K starting. So you're probably going to walk out with one decently equipped around the $60,000 mark. Given especially that maybe I take that back actually. Maybe I'll take that back, because if Super Cruise is standard, that means a lot of other things are standard. So maybe you walk out with one for 54, 55, 56 in that price point. That includes DFC, by the way, destination freight charge, and that amount includes it. And, hopefully dealers don't mark these up too much, if at all, so people can actually buy these. Production will begin late fall of 2024 at the Ramos Arizpe plant in Mexico. And so that's the rundown of the Optic.
Now, the important part, your thoughts.
My thoughts.
There's a lot of information here, and this is where you help people like me understand this a little bit better by breaking it down in your thoughts.
So the powertrain here is fine. I think the powertrain with 300 horsepower and close to 350 pound-feet of torque, and great. Yes, it is an EV, meaning that it's heavier than your typical internal combustion engine vehicle, but I think the powertrain is fine. I drove the Equinox EV all-wheel drive, which makes slightly less power and torque than the Optic, and it was great. The Equinox front-wheel drive is already pretty peppy. It's not blazing fast. It's slower than the Lyriq, I believe. It feels slower than the Lyriq. I actually don't have any stats on how they compare in terms of acceleration. But the Equinox EV front-wheel drive, which obviously derives the Optic, plus all-wheel drive on the Optic. So the Equinox is good. It's already quick. It's already peppy. But then you hop into the Equinox EV all-wheel drive, and it's next level. Like it really does feel faster, even though the rear motor is an induction motor. But don't write it off. Just don't write it off. I actually managed to chirp tires in the Equinox EV with stability control and traction control on.
Wow.
Yeah, it's quick. I actually will have a video review of that probably in about a week or so. So that will be on the MOTROLIX YouTube channel. But overall, the Equinox EV was quite impressive for me. It was agile, it was quick, it was smooth, and I think that the Optic will be even, with its slightly higher levels of power, and what I expect to be even better materials, meaning better insulation, better, NVH-related materials. It will probably be even quicker, and it will also feel more luxurious, quieter. More really quieter is, I think, the biggest thing there. And of course, all the materials are, a grade or several grades above those of the Equinox EV. And then the final thing that I expect here are the dampers. So the Equinox uses normal, passive dampers. These are passive plus, meaning that they have slightly they have a slight ability to react. And that's where the passive plus, I think, is going to really make the Optic shine. So from a powertrain, chassis, driving standpoint, I think this thing will be a home run. The exterior design, however, to me, it's questionable. It's questionable. I mean this in the nicest of ways. First of all, I realize that thousands of people worked on this. These are actual people with real, feelings and thoughts, and right. So I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings here, but
It's not that bad, but it's close.
it's close. It's close. It's not that bad, but it's not that it's bad. It's just that it's way too close to the Equinox EV. When I can tell with a naked eye, and this isn't like my first time seeing this car. I've been tracking the Optiq for, I don't know, at least a year now. I've been looking at it, comparing it, taking we had spy shots, we had leaked images. Thank you, people in China. We love you for leaking the images. Leak more. I've been comparing this thing, and right away, I'm like, is this an Equinox EV clone? Is this really what it is? And of course, it's not a clone, because it does have a slightly different, power and torque output. It's got a different design. The rear end is different. But at the end of the day, that A-pillar, it's that A-pillar. On the Equinox EV, it works. On the Equinox EV, it works because it's so unique, and it kind of works with this funky thing that the Equinox EV has going. It's not the Equinox EV is not a beautiful car, but the design works, in my opinion. This here does not work, in my opinion, right? It's way too close in shape to the Equinox EV. It's way too close in shape at the front, right? The A-pillar area there, to the Buick Electra E4. You can tell that this is, the same. And granted, I don't know this for a fact, but I would bet money that the body panels on the Optiq are not shared with any of those aforementioned. They're not shared with the Equinox EV. They're not shared with the Electra E4. But put them side by side, and the familial resemblance is obvious because of that front, because of the A-pillar. It's there. So to me, using the same A-pillar, and I got to tell you, if I'm wrong about it being the same A-pillar, then it's even worse, because they used a different A-pillar or a different stamping
to make it look
the same. So I really do hope it's the same A-pillar, right? But to me, it's just such a strange decision, because let's take a look at the Cadillac XT4, right? The model that the Optiq will eventually replace in Cadillac's lineup. The XT4 shares nothing with another Chevy, Buick, GMC crossover. Okay, the XT4 shares its platform with, the Buick Regal that's now discontinued, last generation Opel Insignia, and the Chevy Malibu, the current Chevy Malibu that will soon be discontinued as well. But you can't tell. You can't tell. You just can't tell. Here, it shares the exact same front end, I don't want to say front end, but that A-pillar design. And I assume the same thing is true for the B-pillar. Probably not the case after that. C and D are different. But I wouldn't have done this. They have the Lyriq, which is a beautiful car. In my opinion, the Lyriq is one of the most beautiful vehicles on the planet today. Agreed. It has the proper, it has the proper, nice long dash to axle ratio, right? What GM internally refers to as BOFA, ball of foot to axle, to front axle. So it's got a nice long dash to axle. The windshield is more upright than we see on the Optiq. The rear end works in pretty nice ways. This to me does not work at the front, meaning that the front end is actually the best part of the Optiq. The front end looks nice, but that grille, look, what is it, like, I don't know, a 4-inch tall grille? The LED part of the grille, right? Because the Optiq is a bottom breather, like all of these other EVs tend to be from GM. But look at it. It's like so stubby and short. To me, this grille is too stubby. The vertical lights make it look good, but everything else about the design here is a disaster. It's a disaster.
It looks like they did the front fascia.
Yep.
And then they went all the way to the back of the vehicle, and they addressed the Cadillac part back there. Mm-hmm. And then that was it. They called it a day. Yeah. Because it looks like a 2 stories being told in one vehicle.
This is a common theme, though, with GM design. This is a common theme. This goes back to like 3 generations ago of the Chevy Malibu, where the front end was beautiful and the rear end was just a... That's all. That's the best way I could describe it. And the comments during that time were there 2 different people that designed the front and the rear? And this, to me, I don't know. I don't think it's 2 different people. It's not about the people, but it's just that the design language here doesn't really all work all that well. All right, so that's the design. I'm not a fan of the stubby grille. I'm not a fan of the super huge A-pillar. I'm not a fan of any of this. But there's more.
Better?
No,
worse?
Worse.
Oh, man. All right, let's dive in.
Why do this right here? Why do this kink? Why do this kink at the C-pillar, at the door? There's no reason for it. It goes up and then it comes down, so it makes it look like the vehicle was rear-ended. It makes it look like it was rear-ended, and that part right there, this part right here got bent, this like C-pillar kink. It just makes it look like it's got frame damage. You don't want to buy a luxury car with frame damage now, do you? Or that looks like it has frame damage, which is even worse.
It's okay. It'll walk it off. Just
it'll buff right out.
Yeah, let it
this will not buff right out. So why not just make this a straight line right from the B pillar right to the end of the D pillar? It would have looked so sexy if they did it that way. But no, there's this kink. What's up with the kinks? You don't need the kinks.
The Lyriq's lines are very smooth.
Perfect.
They're
edgy and smooth.
Beautifully.
Yeah, right.
That does throw your eye off.
And then we get to this. We get to this etched rear glass, which is, to me, it might be cool. Like, it's a first in terms of everything in the world and design and all that. But it's, to me, this is an answer to a question that literally nobody asked. Nobody asked, we need etched glass over the trunk. We need that. Hey, you know what we want? We want that. That's what we want. We really want that. Nobody asked this. Not a single person. And then that brings us to the back, to the taillights, which are a complete and utter mess, in my opinion. So they're vertically oriented. Great. So they got their lines right, because the Lyriq has vertically and horizontally oriented taillights. The Vistiq will have vertically and horizontally oriented taillights. Guess what vehicle doesn't? The Optic and the Escalade IQ. So they're like they have 2 different design languages taking place here. The Optic and the Escalade IQ seem to have one. And on the Escalade IQ, it works quite a bit better than it does on the Optic because it's a bigger vehicle. And it's much easier to do, design on a bigger vehicle. But then, why not give the Optic the horizontally oriented lights?
It's a very interesting point that you brought up, because the Escalade is the flagship, and this is the entry point. So grabbing elements of design from your flagship, skipping over everything in the middle, and dropping it to your entry level, but executing it in this way. I mean, I could see where they're going for it, and at night I can definitely appreciate it.
So that was my final comment. The Optic, from the footage that we have thus far, it looks great at night. So don't turn the lights on. Keep the lights off.
Drive it at night. You'll be
Drive it at night. Don't go out during the day, because then people will see its various deformities.
But at night, you're coming in as a solid 9.5.
Absolutely.
All day, every day.
Absolutely. So, I think the design could be better. Okay. Let's jump off the design bandwagon. I know we've been on this for a while. So, powertrain's good. The exterior design we already went over. The interior, I think, is great. It's like a mini Lyriq of sorts, and it's spacious as well. So we went over that. So that's really it. That's I'm sure they will sell a decent amount of these, given that they can make them. That's one of the challenges for GM right now, is to actually make EVs in any kind of sizable capacity, because the Lyriq rolled out and it was nothing. It was dry, bone stock dry, for roughly a year. They couldn't ship them. They couldn't build them fast enough. They couldn't it was really all about the battery. It was the battery, the components of the battery, plus a few issues on the motor, the electric motor side of the equation. From what I understand, all that's been ironed out. They've figured a lot of that out. They got rid of most of the bottlenecks. Some of them still exist, but most of them, the biggest ones, have been resolved. So given that they can actually make these in volume, then I think they will sell a decent amount. $55,000 though. For 55 grand, you could get some pretty decent vehicles, right? You could get the reigning champ of the segment, which is the Tesla Model Y. I don't think that's a decent vehicle by any stretch of the imagination. I think this is actually, as bad as I think the exterior design of the Optic is, I do think that it's a lot better looking than any of the Teslas out there today, especially the Model Y. Because that's an egg. At least this doesn't look like an egg, right? Yeah, it does have that. It started to look like an egg at the front. It thought about it with that A-pillar that's like, whee! And then someone caught it and they decided to give it some edges and some lines.
Some therapy.
Yep.
Talked it off the edge a little bit. You got it looking like a car again.
But the front end still, it still kept a lot of that emotional damage that was carried into it.
Like, honestly, I'd pay the $60,000 for this over a Tesla, 100%.
Yeah, but then you can pay $5,000 more and get yourself a Lyriq, which is a much better looking vehicle. So to me, this is where the biggest challenge for the Optic will be. Currently, the Lyriq starts at 60, but that's for I believe that's the base tech trim level, which that's the Lyriq right there. Look at that. Beautiful. That's a beautiful car right there. All right. So yeah, the Lyriq starts at 58 for the tech. When you get into the one that you really want to buy, which is luxury or sport, you're looking at, a few $1,000s more than that. So I imagine that the introduction of the Optic will eliminate the Lyriq Tech trim level. That one you don't even want to buy anyway. It doesn't even have a complete set of headlights like the sport and the luxury have. But so I think the Tech will go away. Lyriq Tech will go away. So now you're stuck with 63,190 or 62,690 for the Sport, Lyriq Sport, and the Lyriq Luxury. So would you not pay slightly more to have a vehicle that actually looks like a car instead of a?
I mean, the execution on the Lyriq is far better.
Yeah.
And now I'm starting to see your point a little bit more on who you're going after, who's going to be buying this vehicle, especially at that range. They're right on top of each other in terms of price.
Now they're right on top of each other, but in the Lyriq, when you end up going in and equipping it with all of the things that you want to equip it with, Super Cruise, for instance, the AKG sound system, you're looking at close, high 60s, low 70s, right around there. So there is quite a bit of a gap there, and that's because it seems like Cadillac, at least for the launch model year of the Optic, they're equipping it very, very, very well. So that might be it. So maybe, 2026 model year, we'll see a less contended model for about 50,000. That would be probably in the sweet spot. But still, I would pay, as it stands right now, I would pay a little more and, I don't know, roughly 10K more, maybe even 5K more, and get myself a Lyriq.
I mean, I saw
just
in
design alone.
Well, I saw it today. I was driving on the street. I had to literally turn around, and I was like, man.
You do a double take. You do a double take all the time. And it's not because, it's not because the Lyriq has something that's incongruent. It's because it's actually good. It's because it looks good.
It's classy. The lines are smooth.
And you know what it doesn't have?
An A-pillar.
It's that A-pillar. It doesn't have the same A-pillar. See, it all starts at the A-pillar. For crying out loud. And it's very strange. I'm just going to say one more thing about this A-pillar. It's very strange to me, to go back in time. And I've covered GM now, for essentially my entire professional career. And I remember the days of badge engineering when they took one vehicle, one body, one interior, one engine, one transmission, everything. They just built one vehicle and then they changed the logos and maybe the headlights a bit and called it a day. The Optic is far from that. It's not, it doesn't have the same interior, it doesn't have the same exterior, it doesn't have anything related to the Electra E4 or the Equinox EV, except for the A-pillar. And that A-pillar is such a defining part of the design that that's all I can focus on. It's like tunnel vision for me at this point. I cannot see anything beyond the A-pillar and the Optic. And then I had to train myself. And this was hard. This is hard work. All right. I had to do a lot of therapy here.
I hope you're okay, man. It's been tough. I know. I mean, you came in a little rough today. I saw it.
It was tough. I had to really try to get past that A-pillar. And it's a shame because the actual detailing on the Optic is great.
It is. I'm not gonna lie. The rear end on it, I like it. I really do. I appreciate it a lot more now that you tied it in with the Escalade and what they're trying to tie in with that. Don't see why they did it. Completely honest.
See, to me, the Escalade shouldn't have that either because the Escalade, the IQ, right? It has the same kind of lines. I would prefer the Escalade to be a big Lyriq than a big Optic. And what we have is, I mean, you could also say that the Optic is a small Escalade IQ. It just depends on how you look at it, right? But in therapy, okay, they told me.
The A-pillar on the Escalade is
the A-pillar is different on the Escalade.
I want to agree, but no.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong here. I thoroughly understand platform sharing and appreciate the realities of, the realities and constraints, I would say, of today's automotive environment. So I get it. They built this short variant of BEV3 around the common A-pillar, but my point is that they shouldn't have. Someone should have said something during the planning stage to kind of protect the A-pillar from being the common visible piece across the Electra E4, the Equinox EV, and then the Optic here. Or, it's very much possible that someone did say something and they just weren't really heard. Who knows? But again, my point is that this common and very noticeable A-pillar across all three of these models, it takes away from the identity of the Optic. And it really takes away from the Cadillac brand as a whole. It's no longer special or unique. It's now shared. It's shared very obviously across Chevy and across Buick. That's really it. That's all I got to say.
Fantastic. Well, question for you.
Yeah.
Any more thoughts? Any final thoughts?
Do you want to hear more about the A-pillar?
I think
I've beaten that horse. It's been dead. I've beaten it. Then I came back, beat it some more, and now you're asking if you want to hear.
Just shoot it. You're just once and for all. Just put it out of its misery.
No, I don't have anything else.
All righty. Well, everybody, thank you all for joining us on the third episode of the Cadillac Society podcast. You can find this show at CadillacSociety.com/podcast and the MOTROLIX Network YouTube channel. Please remember to hit that like button and give us a follow to stay up to date on the latest Cadillac news. We are now on Apple Podcasts, so be sure to subscribe and leave a review. As we mentioned earlier, we'll be available on Spotify and Amazon soon.
Very soon. Very soon. Like, hopefully this week.
Even better.
Yeah.
Stay tuned next week for our fourth episode, where we'll come back to discuss the 2025 Escalade, specifically its diesel engine, or perhaps lack thereof. In the meantime, be sure to visit CadillacSociety.com for the latest news and forums.
MOTROLIX.